You use conservative, and I want you to distinguish between conservative and Republican.
Both words have been tainted now, and it does feel weird to call myself. Admittedly, it feels weird to call myself a conservative because the automatic stereotypes that people have aren't necessarily what I am or what I believe. So even the word conservative has those stereotypes, but Republican is an ever changing name for a political party that can or cannot hold certain beliefs. And those beliefs change over time. A Republican in the 1800s is very different than a Republican in the 2000s, just like a Democrat is very different than to now. And that will always be the case. And I'm not saying that the 1800s Republicans were worse or better, or I'd agree with more or less, but it's always changing. Conservative principles and conservative beliefs are what I got inspired by, but I also feel like that word has been hijacked too, but it still is the most closely aligned word to where I'm at, which is the belief that people and individuals and communities in general make better decisions than the government, and that the marketplace and the American spirit of ingenuity and competition are better, is a better way to focus our time and energy than the government as well, and that individual liberty and freedom and the American spirit of freedom is something that is, really to be cherished, and that we have these values in America that are not perfect and they need to, move towards greater things, but that they have brought so much prosperity and beauty to the world. And like those are, in my mind, traditional conservative principles, these ideas of populism and, America being the only good country, and that we're, the only country that deserves any sort of support, and everyone else sucks, and that we just need to um, basically prop ourselves up and forget about everyone else. And these kind of like weird twists on what I just said are not conservative in my opinion, but I still identify as a conservative because I think it best identifies who I am, even though the word is starting to change.
And I think it's important for listeners to understand that conservation and conservative are not oxymorons.
No.
They have gone together in the past, and you write about this in your book. You talk about Teddy Roosevelt, and you talk about even Richard Nixon starting the EPA, and Ronald Reagan. And maybe you could just talk a little bit about the history of conservation and conservatives.
Yeah, I mean it's a rich history, and again it goes back to the fact that conservative principles inherently are about what I was just explaining, but they're also about inherently conservation. It's literally in the name of conservative to be a conservationist, and you look back at history and that's true. And it's not that long ago that things started to change. I mean, even in 2012 and 2008, John McCain and Mitt Romney were very much pro conservation and pro environment and even pro climate. So it's not like something changed back in, the 40s. This is something that's very recent. And if you want to look that far back, you can look at Teddy Roosevelt, who created basically the national park system as we know it today. You can look at Richard Nixon, who created the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act, who basically is the reason that Environmental Protection Agency is what it is today. You can look at George H.W. Bush, who set aside more public land than any president in recent history. Or you can look at George W. Bush, who signed the largest marine sanctuary of all time into law. I mean, these are common sense. Ronald Reagan had a similar legacy. And these people are actually who popularized American environmentalism as we know it today. So this used to be, not to say that the right has always had the right answers, or that the right, but when the right was leading on this, they were actually working with Democrats. And anybody who's older than me who saw those things happen can attest to that. So I think that there's this frustration in America, this underlying frustration from most Americans about this issue being partisan.